Good afternoon. We're speaking with Lisa Wingate about her brand new book, the Prayer Box, which is absolutely a wonderful book. One of the things I want to do is show the book, which we're doing right now. As a matter of fact, we had to sneak it out of the auction because we didn't have a copy, so we're showing a copy. And this is one of the prayer boxes that she talks about that Lisa made. And if you can hold it up a little bit more, beautiful box. I mean, what a gorgeous gift. And then if you turn around and open it inside, you'll see that she has a cross there. Can you explain the cross that's in the box?
I like to put a scripture and the cross in there because when you write down your prayers, a prayer box is just like a prayer journal, only more functional because you can just write a prayer on any little scrap of paper, put it inside. And I like to put the cross because it's like you're laying your prayers at the foot of the cross when you put your prayers in there.
Nice.
And then closing the lid is very symbolic of just giving it over to God and letting it go.
That is, now explain this particular prayer box, how you did it and what.
Okay, you can use any kind of materials. Sometimes I buy boxes, sometimes I repurpose old boxes. Pepperidge Farms packaging is great. Yeah, anything.
Who knew?
Who knew? Yeah. This one is actually made out of a box that was bought at a craft store.
Mm-hmm.
It's a book-shaped box, and if you're buying one that has a surface you don't want, you basically have to start out by covering the surface, and then the embellishments can be anything. This one was made from an old greeting card. We repurpose a lot of old greeting cards and scriptures. You can print your own scriptures, a prayer box, whatever, things in pretty fonts.
Now, what did you suggest to me? I have two children, adult children, who are getting married. So
right.
What is the purpose of a prayer box?
The purpose of a prayer box is it really is like a prayer journal, but it's more low pressure because a prayer journal intimates that you should write these long things, and a prayer box is, it could be the back of your grocery list. It could be someone you see when you're out in a restaurant that you want to pray for, or something a text that comes in, or whatever you feel the need to pray for. You can write it down, put it in your pocket or wherever, and then when you get home, put it in your prayer box.
Now, what did you suggest? You suggested for newlyweds to have a prayer box. Explain that a little bit.
I like to give them for a lot of occasions, and newlyweds are one of the reasons. There's something very therapeutic or very healthy for newlyweds to be given a prayer box, and I always give them with a letter that says, use this not only to write down your hopes and prayers, but to write down 3 things about each other every day that you appreciate, that you're grateful for, or 3 things in your life, that you're grateful for, because it's a different way of training your thinking as a newlywed, to really look at, while you're going through that push-pull of early marriage, which it's not always everything kids thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And mm-hmm. I teach high school seniors Sunday school, so a lot of our, we know a lot of kids well who are moving into that point in life. And, it can be hard. And if you can teach them to focus on, what do you appreciate about that person? What are you grateful for? What's good? Then it helps to ease and pull back a lot of that. Teaches them to appreciate each other.
Now, how did you happen to come up with the idea of the prayer box and writing about the prayer box?
I was literally sitting down to come up with some book ideas, and I looked across the room and I saw this prayer box that had been given to me by a group some years ago. I was out speaking, they gave me a prayer box as a gift. And I looked at that thing and I thought, what if somebody kept those their whole life? And what if you found them? What if you found these prayer boxes that had been kept throughout an entire lifetime? What would you found? What would you find inside if you found them and you read them? And so it was one of those stories that kind of came all at once. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this big old house, and there's this closet, and this woman has kept these prayer boxes her whole life. And she's decorated them, and they're cigar boxes, and they're cheese crates, and whatever, just things that she has decorated through her life. and put her prayers in there and her letters to God, and what would they be like, and what would they say, and what would someone who's really, truly a person after God's own heart, what would that person be praying for? Because when you write down your prayers, one thing is you have to own up to what you're asking for. It reminds you to pray for people you've promised to pray for. We scattershot things these days. They just poof, they're gone. Little sound bites.
That's true.
And when you write something down and you preserve it, you can look at what did you pray for last year. It's a great thing to do with the family. Make one at Christmas. Write down your hopes and wishes for the next year. Pack it away. Get it out next year.
Iola did it for 80 some odd years.
Hey, there's 81 prayer boxes in the book. Yeah, the first one in the story is given to her when she's a young child and she's sent far away from home and in a very difficult spot. And a teacher gives her a prayer box and tells her to write down her sorrows and her wishes, and that Father will hear her. And so she begins as a very young child writing these letters to Father and just pouring out her heart and her the things that go on in this very difficult life, because she basically is not someone who's had an easy life in the time she's grown up in. She's confronted by a lot of racial issues and things, and so she's chosen to react to it in a very healthy way by giving it over to God and by saying a lot of times, I don't understand this, but I know you hear me. And looking at other people's situations, and, I don't understand why these things happen, but what can I do?
How did you come up with the name Iola? That's an interesting name.
She came with her name. Sometimes I hunt for names for characters, and I'll get the phone book and I'll look and I want a name that sounds older or whatever. But she came with her name. She was Iola Ann Poole from the very minute of her inception. And
really?
Yeah, it happened. This story very much came to me all at once. And so, from then it was just a kind of a matter of working out some of the details of it. But I knew a lot of it right away when I had the idea, and I knew her.
Now, I have a question with Tandy Joe. She used to ride in rodeos. Is there something in your background that brought up... I was a little surprised that she rode in rodeos as her background. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, okay, being a Texas girl and a ranch girl, I did grow up horseback, and I grew up showing, and then at some point in my teenage life, I realized that the boys were cuter at the rodeo, so... That was when my horse show career ended, because horse showing was mostly girls, and rodeos had a lot more cute boys at them. So
we did barrel racing.
We did barrel racing instead. And it was fast-paced, and, I got to a certain point in life where... So I rodeoed all through college and as a young adult and things, and it was just something I did that was fun and that I enjoyed and was challenging,
And so Tandy Joe did the same thing.
So Tandy Joe became a rodeo girl, and she's a girl from a very tough background.
Yeah.
And a lot of rural kids, we think of city kids as having tough backgrounds. But a lot of rural kids have really tough backgrounds. And the thing about being far out in the country is nobody knows what's going on in those
behind closed doors,
little rundown places you pass out in the country, and that's what she comes from.
Now, you also had a black cat in the Victorian house. Do you have a black cat?
We did have a black cat. Some years ago, Scruffy the cat was our black cat, and I don't know that Scruffy really is the basis for Mr. Muggins, the black cat in the book, but the black cat is in a lot of ways a symbol. In a lot of ways, he's a symbol of Iola's life and Tandy's life, because he's very beaten up.
Yes.
He was ugly, he's one-eared, he's not
crafty.
Pleasant, he's crafty, he's a grouchy old thing, but you can tell that he was welcome to share Iola's house. That she even loved this little least of these old, scarred up, beaten up tomcat. And it told me something about who she was. Mm-hmm. That she would take in this
beaten up old
crotchety old cat nobody would want.
Who really knew how to turn on faucets and open doors. He was a clever cat. He definitely was. Now, do you surf?
I do not surf. The surfing is just something that was a creature of the story.
Okay.
The guy Tandy's dating is a surfer early in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of her issues is just bad choices with men.
I was just going to say, she went from one controlling person to another. Is there a reason? Were you trying to show something relative to the controlling men in her life? Or
I think so. That for her is one of the patterns that needs to be broken.
That is a pattern that continues usually with women who like controlling people.
Working with a lot of young people, you see how hard it is for them to break a family pattern. Mm-hmm. What they know, it's like the default on a computer. What you know is default. And it's very hard to not keep going back to default. And that's where she's been in her life. And it's a downward spiral of looking for a man to replace her father and ending up with men who are just like the father who abused and abandoned her. Mm-hmm. But that's reality. There are things not to like about Tandy early in the story, but that's reality for a lot of women, people. A lot of young women. And it becomes reality for their children because the cycle continues unless something happens in your life to illuminate that there's another kind. If kids never see normal from anybody, they have almost zero chance of ever getting to normal. Mm-hmm.
That's true. You chose the setting. Now, you as a Texas girl chose the setting of the Outer Banks. Is there a reason for that? How did you go from Texas to the Outer Banks?
Okay. The story was originally set on the Outer Banks. In Texas. It was set on the coast of Texas. Because I knew it'd be a hurricane story. I knew it would be about this house that was just in ruins, like Tandy's life. And that she would get the job of cleaning out this house after the owner dies. And that's, would start the story because she'd find the prayer boxes. So it's set in Texas. We know a lot about hurricanes in Texas. We have relatives on the coast. We've been through all the beach houses being destroyed and losing these family places that have been in the family since the 40s and all that. So that was the original setting. I was working on it. There's a reader friend of mine who helps me with a lot of technical things and stuff, a retired engineer from NASA. And he had been up to the Outer Banks. He inspired my earlier novel, Dandelion Summer. He had been up to the Outer Banks to visit with his daughter for Thanksgiving. He emailed me and said, Lisa, you need to set a story on the Outer Banks. Hurricane Irene had been through and done all kinds of damage. And he said, because it didn't hit New York, everybody thinks it was no big deal. In the meantime, it had devastated Hatteras and the Outer Banks and wiped out the bridge to Hatteras. And, it was devastating for them. And so he wanted me to set a book there. I said, I kind of filed it in my someday ideas folder because, things due, and I was already going on this book. And I didn't know that Ed was very determined because
he's an engineer.
He was determined that this would happen. So he wrote talked to Shannon, his daughter, and said, if Lisa just happened to want to set a book on the Outer Banks, could she stay in the beach house? And then he contacted me and said that Shannon would love to have me come stay in the beach house if I wanted to set a book there. And so, wouldn't it occur to anybody at that point? Then I had a brilliant idea. I was like, well, this story could be set on the Outer Banks. It's a beach story. So that was the genesis of it. And we went and we stayed and we researched and we talked to the people and we heard their hurricane stories and we looked at the houses that were still sitting in the water and, all the damage and the debris and things that was still there months later. And learned the feel of the place and the smell of the place, and that became like another character in the story. It's such a beautiful, fascinating, historical...
Now that's for the Wright Brothers.
This is where the Wright Brothers flew.
First took off on their airplane.
Where the Wright Brothers flew, where the first European baby born on the New World was born. The first colony of settlers there was dropped off 20 years before the Pilgrims.
Were they? I didn't
The
know
lost
that.
colony. Yes, they were. They were dropped off. It was 100 and some odd people. I'm not sure they know exactly how many, but to found a colony. And they were dropped off. The daughter of the man who was in charge of the expedition had a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So the group of people was left there. The ship sailed back to England to get supplies, got caught up in a war, Spanish Armada, whatever things were going on. It was 3 years before they could come back anyway. When they came back, this group of people had disappeared, and the only clue as to where their whereabouts may have been was a word. The name of the local Indian tribe was carved into a tree there at the site. And they were not able, weather and things, I'm not exactly sure, but they were not able to go search for them. So they don't know, did they travel south with the Native Americans? Were they killed? What happened to them? And so it's a mystery that is still reenacted in an outdoor drama on the Outer Banks.
Wow.
Because nobody knows.
Wow.
Were they the source of there are blue-eyed Indian, there were blue-eyed groups of people who were part Native American, nobody really knows, in the mountains of North Carolina. Are they the descendants of those people?
Wow, that's
Nobody
interesting.
knows. Yeah.
That is really
working on that in the next
intriguing.
book.
Ooh! Now, is that going to be a follow-on to the prayer box, or is this a series, or is this
It's a series. It's a
It is.
loosely connected series, based on some of that history of the Outer Banks, because, when I started hearing and learning those things about the Outer Banks and, where did these people go and things, I thought, that's just so fascinating. What happened to them?
So this is a 3-book series?
This is a 3-book series.
What's the name of the series?
It doesn't really have a name.
Okay, we need a name. Just saying.
Okay.
So we need to talk to Tyndale and everybody
Yes.
else about the name of the series.
We do need to get it a name.
Okay.
We just haven't quite gotten that far yet, but it'll probably be something like the Outer Banks series or something, but
Okay.
we haven't gotten that far
Okay,
yet.
soon to come. Just saying, soon to come we will have. Which
Right.
reminds me, what are the other projects that you have on the horizon?
I have Wildwood Creek, which is the last Moses Lake book,
Mhm.
coming out with Bethany House in February. So that's the end of the Moses Lake series, and then these 3 Outer Banks books are novella book. So there are novellas in between.
Okay.
The prequel to the Prayer Box is the Sea Glass Sisters, so that came out.
Now, is that only
Before.
an ebook?
It's ebook only.
Okay.
Yes, and then there'll be a novella in between, and then there'll be book 2 in this series group. I mean, they're all standalones. I always write things that are standalone.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but we want a series name.
Yes, we'll give it a series name. Definitely.
That's a good thing. Now, one of the things I didn't touch on is within the book, you talk about hanging glass, like hummingbirds in the glass, stained glass windows or pictures
Right.
in the window. Is there something related to stained glass? Is there a reason that you keep putting that in? I see sea glass and stained glass, and I say,
Well, I can tell you where that came from. My Aunt Sandy found out that in Moses Lake Book 3, Firefly Island, yes, we had a contest where readers could write in to join the cast. So 3 readers one reader, and she added her sisters. Anyway, this group of sisters joined the cast as members of the town in Moses Lake. So Aunt Sandy found out about that, and as I was working on the prayer box, and she said, if you can put strangers in your book, why can't I be in a book? So I told her, I said, yeah, sure, if you want to be in the book, you decide somebody you want to be in this little seaside community, and I'll put you in the book. So she said she wanted to be Sandy of Sandy's Seashell Shop. And so she took it a few steps further. She designed the shop. She told me what the shop would look like. She went out and took pictures of other seashell shops. She told me what the seashell shop would sell. And Aunt Sandy happens to be a very talented glass artist.
Okay,
and
that's
so
where the glass
things
work
that
comes
she makes, the sun catchers and beach glass jewelry and all that stuff, went into the book because she makes them.
I knew there had to
yes.
be a background for that. I
yes.
thought, how cute is that?
It was fun.
Now, do you have a critique partner?
Yes and no. I have a group of first readers that read for me. My mother reads for me. Aunt Sandy does now. So, she... and
now, your mom's your agent, isn't
my
she?
mom is my assistant.
Okay.
Yes, and so, we're always working closely together anyway. She reads for me. I have a girlfriend who reads for me. We kind of save her... Teresa Lohman does a lot of design work and other things for me, graphics design and all, but she's also kind of my last reader, so we try not to tell her much about the story. We try to get it kind of not perfected, but finished, and then we give it to her so she can read it without knowing anything about it, which is helpful because sometimes you catch things that timelines or other things, that need to be fixed. And so that's basically what I do for... I get plenty of critique, believe me. Your mama will give you honest critique.
Isn't that the truth?
Oh, yeah.
Now, what message would you like your readers to take from the prayer box?
There's the message of intentional prayer, definitely. And I'm on a little bit of a mission to research prayer boxes because they have a long tradition in Jewish history and among early Christians.
Now, don't they have a prayer box as you're going in and out of the door?
They put one on the doorpost.
And what do? Pray as they go out the door?
Scripture goes in there.
Okay.
And so, which is a beautiful thought when you think about it.
I think it's great.
To surround your going in and coming out with scriptures is beautiful. Really, to me, the underlying message of the prayer box, and I never know... It's always something I figure out as I work on the story, what the underlying message is. But this one, I had been to a writer's conference, and a friend of mine had been and it was not, it was more of a book conference. But anyway, a friend of mine who's a very Christian nonfiction writer, a wonderful writer, had spoken that day, and she'd been kind of questioned by some ladies who were staying in her bed and breakfast who did not appreciate the Christian nature of her presentation. And because they didn't think it was a Christian event, they didn't like it. And so we're sitting at this table discussing, what do you do in a situation like that? What do you say? How do you handle that? Because you don't want to damage people more than they already are. The one lady had said something to the effect of that she got out of church as quick as she could growing up. That it was a bad experience for her, And so, anyway, we're talking about all this, can't quite come up with, we're just kicking it around, nobody's quite got the right thing, and I'm reaching for something, I can't come up with it at the time. So I went home. It was our big youth weekend at church. We do youth, so we were there. I walk in the back door on the big night when the kids are all in singing and praising, and the rock music is blowing the stained glass windows out of the church and everything, and I walk in, and there's this little 8th grade age girl sitting there in the foyer by herself, sulking. And I sat down beside her. I said, what's the matter? Why aren't you in there to join the music with the other kids? And she got a real sour look, and she said, oh, it's all just fake. Here we are studying how not to be posers, because that was the theme for the weekend, how not to be posers. Here we Poser being a fake.
Okay.
A fake, someone who says you're a Christian, but really you're not.
Right.
Okay. So she's, here we are studying how not to be posers. And all these girls are being all friendly to me, and I'll go back to school, and they won't even talk to me. They'll walk right past me in the hall. And so I'm thinking back to that conversation from the writer's thing. What do you say to somebody who's been damaged by someone's, a Christian's, unchristian, unchristlike behavior?
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked down, and sometimes God just gives it to you. I looked down, and I saw her purse was tipped over in the chair between us, and a few of her things had fallen out. And I picked up her cell phone, and I said, what would you do if one of those girls walked by, those girls you're so worried about, that you want to go home now, you don't want to stay here? So what would you do if one of them walked by and grabbed your cell phone and walked off with it? She's like, my life is in that cell phone. Are you kidding? I'd get them. And so I set it back down, and I picked up, she had this little lip gloss, and I picked it up and I said, how much did this cost? And she told me it was $1.50. It's cheap lip gloss. I said, what would you do if one of those girls came by and she picked up your lip gloss? She walked off with it. She's like, I'd jump them. And I said, I love kids. They're so much fun. I said, why would you jump somebody for a $1.50 lip gloss? And she looked at me and she said, because it's mine, it's not theirs. And
you have the attitude so down.
Oh, I know. I love kids. I love teaching them. But I looked at this little girl, and I realized at the time, this is the lesson that Tandy needs to learn in the prayer box. I looked at this little girl and said, if you would not let those people walk away with your $1.50 lip gloss, why would you let them walk away with your faith in you or in God? It's not theirs to take, is it? But we do that. The world is full of Christians who have let people walk off with their faith. The world is full of women who, and sometimes people don't even ask for it. We look across the room and, well, she's skinnier than I am. She's younger. She's prettier. You wouldn't let that person walk off with your lip gloss. Why would you let them walk off with a piece of you? That's the message behind the prayer box. That's what Tandy's got to learn. She's been letting everybody walk off with the pieces of her father, these men, people who don't think she's good enough.
Great message.
She's full of holes.
Wow.
That's what she learns from Iola's prayer boxes, because Iola, with all the damaging things that have been done in her life, she's still solid.
So well stated. Thank you so much. That was great. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Lisa, that was, as you can all tell, this is a fabulous book with a fabulous concept and needs to be read. You're really going to enjoy it. Thank you again.
Thank you.